felt like I had the rug pulled out from underneath me twice in 2 months. And it was just a really sad time. Like I just really had to like sit in my grief. And that was really uncomfortable to do. And so it was sad for my husband. It was sad for me. And my kids didn't really know any different. And we were really intentional about that. But I just never wanted to be in such a vulnerable position again. And so 2023 is when I was like, you know what, I'm really going to move forward on this. Like, I can do this.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Snod. It rhymes with odd, and you're listening and watching another great episode of the Rhymes with Odd podcast. Today, we're back in studio after a hiatus with the owner of Cryo Wellness Studio, yes. Krysta Bryers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Krysta and I know each other because we were on a TV show together.
Can you say that about anybody else you've had on?
No, I can't. Pretty crazy. So this episode will come out, in like 3-4 months. So hopefully it'll be out by then. But
yes.
We were on a TV show called The Blocks, which was filmed in Oklahoma 2 months ago, right? Month and a half ago?
March.
So there was 116 businesses that were there, and
Was there that many?
Yeah. I was walking around talking to people, and there's people from all over the country, all walks of life. And we ran into some Iowans. So, of course, I found out she's based in Clive, which is like 10 minutes from here. So we had to have you on the show.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
All of us Iowans did find each other pretty quick.
Yeah. I think there's 4 of us.
4, yes.
The Versa guys, you, and then there was someone from...
The Potato Spud.
Yeah.
Cedar Rapids.
I don't think I talked to them. I heard of them because someone's like, Iowa, whatever. So, yeah, pretty wild. Like, we had to go to Oklahoma to meet each other to come back here and do this. But
exactly.
Really excited to have you on the show. I think this conversation is gonna be interesting because you're kind of in your infancy of your business. So I think this will be kind of cool. But for people that don't know who you are, what you do, can you just give us a rundown of like who you are and what you do?
So my 2-minute take.
Yeah.
Yes. So my name is Krysta Bryers. I'm a physical therapist, and I have a wellness studio in Clive, Iowa, where I focus on lymphatics, fascia, and localized cryotherapy, where we really dive into the well of your body.
That was less than 2 minutes. You've been working on that. That's great. That's great.
After the blocks.
Sure. Yeah. They had a whole day where we were like, say your pitch. And I think that threw a lot of people off because then it's like day 4. So then everyone's introducing themselves, messing it up and getting in their own head. And it's like, gosh. Yeah. So, but no, I think it'll be an interesting conversation because we've had other, I would say like not cryotherapy, but, wellness in general, like chiropractors, physical therapists, people that are doing kind of a hybrid approach to wellness, because it's not just crack your bones and fix you. It's not just musculature, skeletal. It's the lymphatic system. It's all the stuff that goes into your wellness. So I think this will be a really cool conversation. So before we get super, super, super deep in the hole here, can we talk a little bit about your backstory? Like, where'd you grow up? Where are you from? And how did you get where you are today?
Yes. So I moved to Iowa in 6th grade. I moved around the country as a kid. I was always the new kid up until 6th grade. So I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I went to 1st and 2nd grade in Pulaski, Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia for 3rd and 4th grade. And then I moved outside of Milwaukee for 5th grade. And then I moved to Atlantic, Iowa for 6th grade. So
like Army brat?
My dad was in sales, and so he'd get different promotions. And so we just always moved with different jobs different promotions he would have. And so by the time I got to 6th grade, I had dropped my Southern accent because I worked real hard in Wisconsin to drop that. And, I'd been in 5 different schools at that point. And so we settled into Atlantic, Iowa, where I graduated from high school. And so from Atlantic, I went to Iowa State, and I majored in exercise science, and I earned a scholarship to run cross-country, indoor track, and outdoor track. So I was in season year-round, and I ran all 4 years. And so that really shaped my influence on like my interest in anatomy and body and the movement. And so that's why I majored in exercise science. It was partly because I was interested in it, but I was also kind of like, oh, how can I be faster? And so I really absorbed all the things that I learned, and even just learning how to lift weights and the anatomy and the why behind things. So I really enjoyed that. And then from there, I went to University of Iowa, and I got my doctorate in physical therapy. And at Iowa, just really kind of dove more into all of that. And then You want to know more from there?
Sure. No, I have a bunch of questions. That's a good place to probably stop, I would say. In terms of like traveling around, what was the oddest thing about your childhood? Because it's like usually you have that core group of friends, or you have one or two like really close. Well, I should say for guys, I always had one or two close friends. Girls tend to have like mobs of friends anymore. Let's have a sleepover. And there's 30 people at a house where it's usually like one or two people for a guy. But tell me, like, what was your childhood like? Like jumping ship every couple years to go to a new town?
I will say one thing I thought was kind of odd. Like I never grew up with like my family down the street. I always felt a little jealous of like, oh, that would be really nice to have your grandparents like down the street. Or especially when I moved to Atlantic, all the kids in Atlantic had gone to elementary school together. Like they grew up together. Their parents grew up together. And so they all had like their jokes and inside things from second grade at Schuler Elementary. And it's like, I don't even know where Schuler is, let alone like your jokes or games from second grade that you still talked about in sixth grade. So I always kind of felt a little left out, like, oh, I didn't have that sort of experience. But, I also was able to do other things that were different. Like on the weekends in Virginia, we'd go up to the mountains and do the drives through the mountains, or go to Lake Michigan over weekends when I lived in Wisconsin. So, whether I realized it or not, like I had a lot of other experiences that you don't necessarily get in Atlantic, Iowa.
Sure. No, that's great. In terms of running, was that a way that you could get in with a clique and at least like have some unification of like, I'm new to the school, but I'll run on the track and cross country team and have a friend group that way? Or was it just kind of a way for you to challenge yourself and you like could do things outside of school that way?
I will say, like, whether I realized it or not, like, I have had some of the same friends. Like, the girls who I ran track with have been some of my best friends through life at this point. And I just think runners in general are a real community-based type of people. Like, oh, you're a runner? I'm a runner. Have you done this race? And so that's just how runners are. Like, we love other runners. And so I am definitely like that. I love other runners. And so but yeah, I don't think I necessarily ran to seek out a group for that reason, but that's how I have found my group, through running. Sure. And it's really shaped even my profession. Because I ran, it's shaped what I've done with my life. And I really think I got more into running because my dad, he was a runner. And so, I don't know, I think when you're a kid too, you kind of gravitate towards things that your parents do, whether you realize you do it or not. And then I also, when I was in elementary school, like I loved to beat boys. I loved to be faster, and I was competitive. And so I just liked to win when I was younger.
Oh, I love it. What's a highlight of yours from like the track resume or the cross country resume? Did you guys ever go to state? Did you place? Did you have some like just by the hair of your nose winning, like the ticker tape thing? Is there any huge experience that sticks out to you as a track or cross country memory?
Well, in high school, we won state 3 out of the 4 years I was there. And then I won a lot of races. But I mean, to me, I think the biggest thing is I have taken what I did in high school and beyond. Like I still run, like I'm 40. And it really helped shape a career. So for me, it's been a lifelong hobby and habit that I think has really shaped my influence on and my view of health and wellness. I think my views have evolved over the years. Like when I was maybe 24, it's like, well, if you're not running a mile like at 6:30, are you healthy? But now at 40, it's evolved where it's like, oh, let's just move and feel good. But because I've developed that as a habit through my life, it's not a stretch to go out and run 30 minutes at 40.
Sure. No, I love that. And I also agree. Like I've also been super into fitness my whole life, and 3-sport athlete in college. I didn't play anything. I had to reinvent like, who the heck am I?
Exactly.
That type of thing. And yeah, I kind of fell into it. And a lot of people will say like, well, how are you so productive or get so much done? It's like, just take care of your health. Like
absolutely
eat well, get a good night's sleep if you can, drink water, like the simplest things. But you look at people that are like strung out, like a CEO or has 100 employees. It's like, they don't take care of themselves, and it affects everything. So I think you're right on the money there.
Well, I always tell people too, like you are your most important investment, because I've seen people when don't take care of themselves and the repercussions of that. So if you treat yourself like a long-term investment and the little deposits you make into yourself daily, it pays off in dividends over time.
I love that. In terms of the running, you said it shaped a lot of your career and who you are. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from running and how you've applied them in your life?
I'd say patience and persistence. And then, going out and doing something you don't necessarily want to do. Like it's not fun to go out in the rain or in the cold or get dropped off 6-7 miles out of town and then run back. But a lot of discipline with that, especially like when I was in college and in my 20s, running a lot more. I haven't run as much in my 30s after I had my first baby. But definitely persistence, patience, and I'd say really dedication too.
Sure. And kind of the last thing before we move into current day is like you'd mentioned you ran in college as well, right? What was the biggest adjustment for you from running in college versus high school?
I think the intensity. It was a lot more intense, and especially like there's never an off season because I would go from cross country right to indoor, right to outdoor, and then summer you would train. And I even think too beyond college, shifting away from that athlete mindset when I was like 26, 27, I still definitely had like an athlete mindset where when I lived in Chicago, I had people stop me on the L or at the hospital I worked at, like, oh, we see you running on the lake. Like, you're fast. And it's like, oh, thank you. But I mean, I didn't touch on this earlier, but I ran five marathons. I ran Boston when I was 12 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
In the rain with a headwind the whole way. It was awful, but I finished it. I mean, I thought about quitting several times, but then I ran by someone with a double amputation. I was like, okay.
Pick it up here.
Okay,
Come on.
I guess I'll finish this stupid race.
Yeah. There's the community aspect you're talking about. Somebody you're about to fall over and someone runs with you. It's like, okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah, but I think the biggest transition was moving away from that like rigidness, structure of when I turned 30, really, of I don't need to kill myself to be benefiting my health. I can get just as much out of a 30-minute run in terms of health and mindset as I would from a 2-hour run. I don't need to do that because I'm not training. And so shifting from that, I don't know, the rigidness that you don't have to do that to benefit your health.
I totally agree with all this because we're my similar situation. My wife and I just had our second. We have had our daughter 4 months. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a 4-month-old and an almost 2-year-old. And now it's just like I was telling Aaron earlier, I'm like, we just need to get it in. Like I used to do 5-6 days a week, 2-hour sessions.
Yes.
We'd do fasted cardio in the morning, come back, do weights at night, run, hybrid train. Like I mean, I would go so deep on this stuff, but now it's like I just need to maintain until I'm out of the woods. And then once the kids are a little older and I can breathe again, let's like reintroduce this more frequently. So I think like you said, there's ebbs and flows. You're not running like you were when you were in college, but also you're not the same person you were when you're in college. Like your life is different now.
Totally. So. Yeah. And I think moving away from this, like, oh, if you're not doing an hour or two, you're a failure mindset. It's just, there's so much benefits for 30 minutes. And that's all I've done in my 30s, really. I just do 30 minutes a day.
Sure.
And that's been great. Sometimes less, sometimes more.
Maintenance
but on average,
is huge. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so moving in, we got to this point. You graduated with your doctorate of physical therapy from Iowa. Did you move out of Iowa to go practice elsewhere? What was that process like for you getting a job out of college?
Well, when I graduated in 2008, probably like most people, I was like, I am getting out of Iowa and I'm never coming back to Iowa. So I interviewed in Austin, Washington, D.C., Dallas, and in St. Louis at Barnes Jewish Hospital. And St. Louis at the time offered student loan repayment because I didn't have any debt from undergrad, but I had loans from PT school. And so my parents were like, well, you get student loan repayment, like that's where you should go. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go to St. Louis. I didn't really like St. Louis. I didn't really like Barnes. So after about 6-7 months there, I moved to Chicago.
Did they ask for the money back?
No, I didn't even get anything because it was like a vested schedule.
Oh,
they wanted you there.
There's a term from the TV show.
That's right. So I learned about vesting in 2009 when it didn't work out for me.
Well, you learned the hard way.
I sure did.
That's funny though.
Yeah. And so, and it was a graduate investment too. So you got more money the longer you were there. But I was like, I just don't even like this town. I don't like this place. And so I sold my Torsades as a Ford Taurus, my Torsades. and I got a studio in Lincoln Park. My friend checked it out for me. And I started working in Chicago. And so I got an L pass, and I took the bus and the train every day.
Sure.
So that was an adventure too.
Sure. Well, you're talking about running in the city.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because, I mean, were treadmill running? Were you doing streets? Did you find outdoor places to go? Because you leave kind of this rural area. You could literally go run a gravel road, and no one would be like, oh, as long as you're not broken down, keep going. You know, some farmers like, do you need a ride?
Oh, yeah. That actually happened to me. I was running in my grandma's town when I was a student in physical therapy school, and this person pulled me over like, are you Anita's granddaughter? I'm like, yes, I am. Do you need a ride?
You're just running for fun?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like the Back to the Future line where he's like, run for fun. They all laugh at him. Yeah, people run for fun now.
Yeah, that's what it was like in Northeast Iowa. What are you doing? But in Chicago, I just got really, I think being a runner anyway, you get really good at reading ebbs and flows of streets and like when to cross. And so I was already good at that. But I would run on the lake path a lot and the streets. So there wasn't as much variety for me because you'd get stopped sometimes.
Sure.
But I would just go to the lake and either go up or down.
Sure.
And back.
So you're in Chicago. You're kind of doing that. How long were you there?
I was there for almost 7 years.
Okay. And then what kind of like took you from Illinois to come, because you came back to Des Moines, right? Or Des Moines area? Yeah.
So I was there for almost 7 years, and I worked in a big academic teaching hospital. And I met my husband in Chicago, and we had our first baby. And then when we really started to look at the math of it, of like, okay, childcare is going to be this much, I decided to get a car. I didn't have a car for years, and so I got a car. And then it was like, okay, well, by the time I paid to park this car, it was $250, and then $75 to park it at my hospital, and then the childcare costs. It was kind of like, what are we doing? I don't know if this makes sense. And so my husband works in agriculture, and so it was like, well, maybe it makes the most sense to move to Iowa. And so I had my first baby in Chicago, and he was born in November 2015. And then we moved to Iowa. We bought a house on a FaceTime tour, as one does. And so
very current day of you.
Yeah, I was ahead of the curve in January 2016, and which is also an ideal time to move with a 10-week-old baby. So moved to Iowa with my new car, my baby, and my husband into a house I'd never seen.
Sure.
So it was wild.
Sure. And it sounds like were you sad to leave Chicago, or was it like just the natural next step for your family?
No, I was super sad to leave Chicago because I loved Chicago and I wasn't ready to go yet. And so I think also like whether, I think people are starting to talk about it a little bit more, but I also think too, there's just such a learning curve to being a mom after your first baby. It was just, I missed a little bit of like my freedom of my lifestyle. Like, oh, I'd want to go down to do this yoga class. I'm going to go run. But now it's like coordinating like, okay, who's going to have the baby? And so it's just a lifestyle shift of having a baby, but then also now a lifestyle shift of my lifestyle of like, oh, I have a car and a house and we have to worry about shoveling our driveway, all of that sort of stuff. And the winter weather, like I hadn't drove a car in like 7 years. And in the winter, it's like, ooh, ice. And, the baby is like the flu season. So it was just a big change all at once. But I can also say now it was the best thing we've done for our family. That, of course, like that made sense to do.
Sure.
But it takes time.
Right. And you're learning as you go. Like you said, it's
totally
the next chapter, but also what worked before you might not have the skills and knowledge to figure that
Absolutely.
out. So that's huge. Okay, so you moved to Des Moines. Mm-hmm. Did you start working for a hospital, a clinic? What was kind of your next role when you moved here?
Yeah, so I started to work part-time when I moved to Des Moines, and I went back to work when my oldest boy was 4 months old. And so I was really interested in just work-life balance because when I was in Chicago, I worked a lot of holidays and a lot of weekends, and I just didn't want to work Christmas Day, seeing all these joint replacements or, whatever else. And so, or strokes. And I just didn't, I wanted to spend Christmas with my family. So I worked at a hospital downtown that they didn't require weekends or holidays. So I was like, this is great. So I worked about 3 days a week. And that's what I pretty much did while all my kids were real little.
Sure. So how many kids do you have now?
I have 3. So I went on and had 3 boys in 3 years. So I had 3 boys in 40 months. So I'd have a baby, and then 12-month mark, I was pregnant with another baby.
Sure. So it's one of those times that, like, if someone saw you in those 3 years, like, you're just always pregnant. You're like,
oh yeah,
same baby still? Like, you're still pregnant from the last one? Like, no, I think our track coach was like that when I was in high school. She had like 5 kids, and she was pregnant for like the entirety of I was like, when I was a freshman in high school, I'm like, you're pregnant then, and I'm like graduating, she's pregnant still. I'm like, what the heck? So that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, pregnant and breastfeeding that whole time. So, sure. I mean, what a time.
Sure. Yeah, you probably didn't drink for like 5 years. It's like, I'm constantly having to breastfeed everybody. So that's cool.
Well, that didn't stop me from having the occasional glass of wine.
Sure. Yeah. Why not? Why not? I think it's interesting, though, because as that kind of progresses, though, like you said, it changes your perspective on when can I squeeze in my personal time, but also like, what do I want my career to be? Because some people just might want to like hang on to their job, but other people might just become full-time. Because I know with childcare, they always say like that kind of 2 to 3 is where you have that decision. So did you ever have to weigh the decision of like one of you guys being stay-at-home parent versus the other, or did you always think like, okay, well, I still want to prioritize my career as well?
So for me, I worked like 3 days a week. And so I personally like getting out of the house because, 3 boys under 3, going to work sometimes was a break from the noise, like the Grinch noise. That was like my house sometimes. But I loved having my days at home with my kids and having adventures. But I also loved going to work those few days too, and just the change of pace and the quiet of that as well. And even just the freedom and the autonomy to go to the grocery store alone. I mean, that was also so nice. And so I just, for that time, like so what I really have done, I've worked part-time, but I've worked PRN jobs. And so I've just really hustled for a few years there where I was always working the days my kids were going to daycare. And I always made sure I worked about 6 hours to make that all make sense for me.
Sure.
And so I mean, I've had people calling me to come work for them, and it's just as okay as long as I can have my time with my kids. And so there's definitely like, okay, well, does this math make sense? But I was always able to make the math make sense to keep doing that, because I know I also was like, well, I spent a lot of time and money to go to school too, but I also have loved my time with my kids. And so I feel like I've been intentional. My days at home with my kids, we went out and did things. So I felt really full those days too.
Sure. No, I love that. And I think a lot of parents could probably connect with that. It's like finding the balance is really difficult. As we're kind of coming back to when you launched your business, walk me through the series of events that kind of got you to the point where you're considering going off and doing your own thing. Because you said you're working part-time, you're kind of filling where you can. What kind of what things transpired to get you to that point where you're considering doing your own business?
Yeah. So I would say in general, like I was just really comfortable. I was comfortable being comfortable until I was uncomfortable. And so I really started to get, I've always wanted to do what I'm doing, a wellness studio, but it just for me took time and I think maybe experience and confidence, like, okay, I could do this. But what really sprung it into action is late 2022, my kids started to go to school. And so I was saving money on childcare at that point.
Sure. That's huge.
That is huge. God bless anybody who's out trying to do a business with kids and childcare. I mean, those are the real heroes.
Sure.
But in late 2022, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had 2 lumpectomies and a bilateral mastectomy all within 6 weeks. And I would say it was kind of a complicated relationship with my mom, if I'm being completely honest. And she passed away 2 days after her mastectomy. And my parents never even told me about her cancer diagnosis. And so that was really hard and complicated. I kind of felt like I had already grieved, but I wanted my mom to be my whole life. But I really grieved the finality of it all after she had passed away. And so, but in a weird way though too, like I felt like, I don't know, maybe I could soar a little bit more without some criticism from her. And so, but then 2 months after that, my husband was recruited to work for a startup in West Des Moines. And, he was promised all these things, and he worked really hard to grow the business and was growing the business. And out of nowhere, they just let him go. And they refused to pay him out money he was owed. And it was a really terrible time. And they've gone on and done that to a few other families. And that all happened the week before Thanksgiving, so 2 months after my mom died. So I felt like I had the rug pulled out from underneath me twice in 2 months. And it was just a really sad time. Like, I just really had to sit in my grief. And that was really uncomfortable to do. And so it was sad for my husband. It was sad for me. And my kids didn't really know any different. And we were really intentional about that. But I just never wanted to be in such a vulnerable position again. And so 2023 is when I was like, you know what, I'm really going to move forward on this. Like, I can do this. And so I really spent the better part of 2023 working out of my husband's, what I affectionately call his tiny house. As all good businesses start from a shed or a garage, that's where my studio started. Out of his tiny house. And so I would have people come to my husband's tiny house all summer and all spring, and I would practice on some of my friends, and then I started getting some paying customers to come. And then I had a Maggie Goldhammer's her name, with Somo Studios. She helped me with my branding and my website and really pulling it all together, because I knew it was kind of a different concept from what I wanted to do. But if it looked good, was cohesive, was pretty, consistent, people would respond to that. And so, because I would respond to that. And so I just really thought about, what is it that I want to have in a clinic, in a space? What is it that's missing that people aren't getting? And so that's what I really designed my wellness studio around. What's the space? What's the gap? Because I've been working in it for 15 years at a lot of different levels of care. And so, yeah, that's how I really took off with it.
Sure.
And so I started my studio space November 2023.
Sure, so, like 6 months ago.
6 months ago,
that's,
yeah.
That's exciting.
I call it my fourth baby.
Sure, that's super cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, do you feel like going through those two huge hardships in your life, like, do you feel like that pushed you to start the business, or would you have ever even considered doing it if you hadn't had like some of these negative things that were like, there's got to be some happiness somewhere else that I can kind of go find? How did that affect your decision to go off on your own?
I mean, I was comfortable being comfortable. And so it's uncomfortable to start a business, but this has not been anywhere near as uncomfortable as I was in 2022. So I would not have done this if I didn't have that push to be like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And it really has driven me and put a fire underneath me that I can grow and do this. Because I don't know, it was really hard in 2022. And so far, this has felt way easier than what 2022 did.
Sure. With the fire that's under you, is it, what's kind of the motivating factors that you're really like, things that are pushing you to go to the next level? What are those things for you?
I think the things for me is that I can get to a point where I'm not worried of like, oh, will people still come, or that it's been consistent enough that I could maybe add another location. Or, I really wanted to develop like a product line and video content where I can get into all those different areas and feel like, okay, I can coast a little bit. But I don't know, does anyone ever coast though? Sure.
No, I don't. I like to think like that's what keeps us going, is like I said, when I get out of the woods, like I say that about my own situation, and like that doesn't, nothing will ever change. Like,
yeah, I don't know. Is anyone ever out of the woods?
Sure.
I don't know.
No, that's super interesting. So for myself and others listening, like, explain a little bit about your clinic, what you offer, and like how it's different or unique from like going to a hospital or any other kind of like PT service that's out there.
Yeah. So although I'm a physical therapist, I'm kind of applying my knowledge of anatomy in a different way. So a few things I do. I'm a VODR trained manual lymphatic drainage therapist. And then I also have done a Renata Franca Brazilian lymphatic drainage therapy. So, traditionally in a hospital, you'll be doing lymphatic drainage if you've had cancer treatment. To prevent lymphedema. But I kind of consider the lymphatic system of what the pelvic floor was in the early 2000s, because this is how long I've been around. In the early 2000s, I was like, we don't have a pelvic floor problem unless if your uterus is falling out of your vagina. That's not a problem until then.
Sure.
But now we know it's like, well, you have other problems with pelvic floor. And I kind of think of the lymphatics as the same way. Like, you can have a lymphatic problem if you don't have lymphedema. So it's so involved in our immune system, obviously the cancer part of it, immune system health, digestive health, and even just like our appearance of our skin. So it's really involved in a lot of different systems. Fluid regulation, bloating, hormones. It's all super influential with that. So that's where I kind of use the VODR technique more. The Renata Franca technique is more so that really, if you have an event, you're getting married, you're going on vacation, you're like, gosh, I really just want to look good, kind of gets rid of some of that bloat. So the lymphatic drainage plus a sculpting component of it. And then I do this like facial sculpting technique. So working on the muscles of the face, because our face is full of muscles. And I think traditionally we've just been taught like, oh, just put some serum and toner on your face and that'll improve everything. But it's like, why would we do that? I don't put that on my bicep, like I don't expect my bicep to get bigger with serum. And so just really taking care of the muscles of our face and doing the lymphatic work with that. And so I kind of say drain, lift, tone, sculpt. And so going inside the mouth to do releases with that also. And so not only does that have lifts the muscles of your face and has obviously an aesthetic part of it, but also just releasing tension through the jaw. So many people carry tension through the jaw, and how does that impact so many other systems? And then localized cryotherapy for pain, and then cryocontouring, so kind of a targeted fat loss with the cryotherapy, and then combining it with lymphatic drainage.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So for folks that don't know, like how would someone present that would be like, man, I should go see you? Like, is it there's swelling, bloating, and all of the above? Like, are there ailments that would bring someone to come to you?
Yeah, so I would say from a lymphatic standpoint, I have a lot of people who have some digestive issues, who are bloated, who've had chronic sinus issues, headaches, migraines, fatigued, jaw, face pain. I love working on all of that.
Sure.
And then I have a lot of brides who are getting married, and they kind of like the Renata Franca technique as
Sure.
well. And then I have a lot of other women too, I think, especially after you have kids, and just how a baby sits on you after you've had kids or been pregnant. I think the cryocontouring, if you're done breastfeeding, is a really great option. I have a lot of women who have had kids, and they're just feeling really bloated after having a baby because of just how babies sit on you in terms of lymphatics, compressing your organs, compressing your groin lymphatic nodes, and then just even if you have IVs during birth, you carry extra fluid while you're pregnant. So I love working with all those types of people.
Sure. It sounds like most of your customer base is probably mainly women, it sounds like,
yeah.
or almost exclusively, or do you work on both men and women?
No, I have men also who come in, but I would say probably 90% women.
Sure.
But, men also can have lymphatic issues. Like if they have some digestive issues, I have men who come in who love having their face massaged with some of the facial sculpting stuff, going
Sure.
inside the mouth and releasing some of the tension through the jaw.
Sure.
That's for everybody.
Sure. That's
if
great.
You got
to
a jaw.
Right. If you don't have a jaw, then maybe they'll cryotherapy, other things, other services.
But I have men who come in too with aches and pains in different areas and just want to get back to movement. And that's what I love about the localized cryotherapy. I think just keep people moving. So if we can kind of alleviate some of the pain, then that's great. Let's get you back.
Sure. So you talked about how you were working out of a she shed when you first started.
Yeah, my husband's tiny house.
Talk to me about, if you can get it to work in a she shed, once you got an actual location, that's got to be like butter.
Yeah.
So walk me through like how many patients you had or clients, and then when you started like, okay, I'm actually going to get like a physical place for some legitimacy, like what was that process like for you?
Well, I had a hard time in my husband's tiny house because the air conditioning wasn't too good. And so, and the ventilation wasn't very good. And then I talked about it with a few friends and they're like, well, no one's ever legit if you're working out of, you're not legit if you're working out of a tiny house or your husband's shed. And so I was like, hey, I gotta get a physical location. And so I talked with one of my friends who's actually my former PT student. Her name's Courtney Bureau. She has Revive physical therapy, so she focuses on women's health. And so she put me in touch with a few people. And so I just knew I just needed a room. I didn't want to have like super high costs to start, low overhead. And so she put me in touch with some nurses who do functional medicine, IV wellness. And so I am renting a room from Amanda Cramey with Vivid IV in Clive. And so I think it's a really nice synergy flow, so to speak, no pun intended, of what we're doing and what they're doing with the IV wellness.
Sure. No, I think that's great. And I got that same advice from my financial coach because I was looking at for my studio, like 2,000 square feet, and they're like, Ryan, you don't need, start small. Like you can always outgrow it. You can always go up. But if you bite off more than you can chew your first place, it's like, it's just not going to be a good time for you because then you're stressing about like paying for, like you said, your overhead when it's like, I should be focusing on like better service for my clients and like getting people in, like all the things you want to do to grow.
Totally. So to answer the other part of your question, so right now I have about 20 to 24 people a week, and that's my top. I can't take more people on beyond that. But how I started this is the second week of November is when I started to take clients on, and then I would open my schedule, and I started to get a few people trickle in, and so I'd have, I think maybe anywhere from 5 to 8 people a week. And then I would go back and forth from the hospital to my studio. And so some days I would start at my studio, then I go to the hospital in the afternoon, and then I just kind of organically built it. And so I've really benefited from positive word of mouth, and that's really how I've built my business so far. And I'm so grateful for the people who have shared about me, who've told friends, who've shared about me on Instagram, because that stuff really has an influence, whether we realize it or not.
No, I love it. Another question too is, do you guys also like do insurance, or is it just out of pocket? What's kind of your structure for payment for that stuff?
Yeah, so I'm just cash pay because I feel like insurance doesn't really pay for maintenance. I shouldn't say I feel like they don't.
Right. Most PTs I talk to or chiropractors, it's like you really have to decide what side of the aisle you're going to be on with that stuff. It's like if you do the insurance stuff, then you might need to have someone on staff that's just constantly running bills down, trying to find like, will the company pay for it? Will the client pay for it? Like I think that's the juggle, you know?
Yeah, and just knowing how like some of the billing stuff works. Some of the stuff I'm doing isn't covered by insurance. And I think if you can bring results and show people like what you're doing is making a difference, like, it will work out. I will say I have been working on insurance coverage for lymphedema, which is more so the part that's related to cancer care. And sometimes there's people who have primary lymphedema, and so that's a malformation of their lymphatic system, or secondary, which is what we traditionally think of if you've had lymph nodes removed related to oncology care. So I am exploring that. So that's something I'm working on.
Sure. No, that's great. What was kind of obviously you went off on your own. What was the biggest challenge for you personally? Because most people that do this type of thing, they're a practitioner. Most owner-operators, that's myself included. Thankfully, I'm kind of a business nerd, so I like the business stuff, but most people would just prefer to show up, have your books booked out. Like, what was your biggest adjustment in starting a business for you personally?
I think initially it was like, okay, I'm open, I'm here. Okay, but now how do I get people in? And so I've always worked in a hospital, so I didn't necessarily have a big following already of like, oh, I've worked with her already. I know her. So really trying to start from ground zero of having people come. So I and honestly, I still worry about that. Like, oh, I hope people come. And so, but I also knew too, like, to me, if you can create an experience and have a positive vibe, create like a nice atmosphere, like people like that, and they'll come back. And if you'd listen to people, and so I think that's the biggest thing, just listening and adjusting. But yeah, I think just will people come?
Sure. So you launch in November. You're kind of getting off to the races, and then you get some ad for a TV show that we were both on.
Yeah.
How did you end up on the blocks?
So right before I started my business, it was fall break for our school. And so my family, we went to Marco Island. And so I was laying in bed and I saw this thing like, oh, you an early entrepreneur. And I was like, yes, I am. How did you know, Facebook? How did you target me so well? And so I was like, well, I'll apply to this and see what happens. And so I applied and they got back to me pretty quick. And then I went through a second round. And then that's when I told my husband when I was about to do my third round, I was like, oh, I'm doing this and I don't know what's going to happen. And then I ended up getting asked to be on it because I even told them, and I still feel this way, and I kind of maybe have changed my mind a little bit, but I was taught to be a physical therapist and to write goals for insurance reimbursement, not necessarily to run a business. And I find it interesting because I've talked to a lot of other people too, and they've all said the same things. Well, who does teach anyone to run, to have a business? Because being in business is a lot different than having a business, So working for somebody is completely different than owning and working in and on your business. So those are two very different things. But no one ever teaches you how to have your own business. So to me, that's what would seem really appealing to the blocks.
Sure.
No, I'm sure to you too.
Totally. Yeah. And it's similar to myself. Like I worked in the industry for 5 years before I went off on my own. So I could see firsthand like things I liked, things I didn't like. And then when I do my own thing, I will change this, that, and the other things. That helps. But
totally.
I think, like you said, the mindset shift changes where you're like, oh, now it's not just treatment of clients, but also like, how are we going to make payroll? Where are we going to get money for advertising? How are we going to, like, all these questions and things you didn't realize. So that's huge. So you get on the show. What was kind of the goal for the show? That was going to be your business school basically for you, right? What was the goal for you?
I say the goal for me is just like tangible takeaways. I've always been into like, okay, what can I actually take away and implement and to do with this? And also I would say too, just to like have more confidence as like to know what I'm doing. Because I think a little bit of us have some imposter syndrome, whether we realize it or not. But I feel like since I've done it, I feel a lot more confident as to like, okay, the direction that I want to go and how I'm going to get there.
Sure. For me, it was, I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to do with my company in the next year. I almost wanted like permission to do it.
Yeah.
But also like validation is like, is this the right thing for me to do? So I think that was kind of my thing. And then I got more value from just talking to the other contestants because I ran into some other people, like people that stick out to me, like Jenna Brown from Phoenix. So she's a business consultant, and some of the Versa guys, we had some good conversations, and just a bunch of other people that I couldn't even list them all, but I feel like those are the ones that you learn the most from.
Totally.
And for me, I'm like such a video marketing nerd that I'm like just giving out so much free, unsolicited advice. I'm like, let's talk about how you should be doing video, this, that, and the other thing. And then they're telling me, oh, you should be doing this, that, and the other thing. It's like, oh, we're kind of learning from each other.
Yeah, totally. So, how long have you had your business?
So I started 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
But I was doing nights and weekends for the first 4 years. Wow. And then been full-time the last 3.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I was kind of a sleeper agent. Like I was doing it for fun. And then similar circumstances changed for me, and my wife and I were engaged and we wanted to pay off all of our debt. And I was like, well, if this is a business, I could like do more work and then just put our foot to the floor with that, cut all of our expenses as much as we could. We paid $116,000 off in a year and a half. And then I looked up and the business was doing very well. And I was like, I should do this full time. So that's the short version of it.
Yeah,
but
that's cool.
That was the thing pushing me. It was like, how much more could I do? How much more work could I take on? And then everyone just assumed I was already full time because of how I was marketing myself and pushing it. And that was kind of the deciding factor for me. So yeah, that's that piece of it. In terms of like what did you take away from the show? You said you were like looking for takeaways. Was there some things that stuck out to you? Like, oh, I have to implement this.
Well, kind of like you, I feel like for me, I've really just have trusted my gut and my instincts in what I'm doing. And so also for me, I felt like validation of like what I wanted to do. So, I mean, things I'm working on is a blog. And I think just the different avenues of marketing. And then just, how to grow in the future, whether that looks like with a partnership or what's the word I'm looking for? Franchise.
Sure.
And so just how to go about doing that and just some of the education around that I thought was what I was looking for is the education.
Sure. Because in your mind, how do you picture this growing? Do you just want to stay small and just be you, or do you want to have multiple locations? Like, what's kind of your growth plan for the company?
Well, initially, I really wanted to do more like a franchise concept to find other therapists who are just kind of fed up with the system of therapy and healthcare and to have their own autonomy in how they want to do their business. And so that's been my initial instinct. And then I really want to do some product development.
Sure.
And then some video education pieces with this as well. This summer I am doing a plastic surgery certification. So I really, with lymphatics, and so how to combine the oncology and the plastic surgery piece of it together with women who are getting mastectomies and reconstruction. I think it's a really highly ignored group that has a lot of needs.
Sure. Well, and I think you're so niche with the lymphatics approach that I think there's a lot of people seeking that. Because even from the blocks when we were there, I think of like Amanda. I can't think of her last name.
The cute little blonde.
Yeah, she was always on the stage, of course.
Yes,
preparing.
She crushed.
Yeah, she was doing very well.
Yeah.
But they were doing a similar thing. It's like she was killing it in permanent makeup, and then she kind of shifted her focus to educate permanent makeup people and kind of build this like franchise model or a training system. Because I think this is just how my mind works, but like you could do a online certification training program, have them pay upfront for that, and then if they wanted to be a part of your network for ongoing stuff, there could be a membership tied to that too.
Yeah.
So that's another piece too of like ways to monetize the community, but then also like help other people grow it too.
Totally.
So
those are all things that I would love to do.
Sure. Well, even the franchise model, I was just in Jacksonville last week speaking to SteriClean. They're you ever seen Hoarders, the TV show?
Oh yeah.
They're the company that comes in and cleans out crime scene.
Yeah.
And then also hoarding houses and stuff like that.
Ugh.
And their franchise model is interesting because they have like, 60 locations around the country and how they lean on corporate for help, but also they have the autonomy to do it themselves. They just pay a percentage royalty every year. Yeah. They get the branding, they get the help, all the stuff that they need. So that's definitely like a big piece of it too. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like, PTs and OTs in particular are all doctorate levels of education at this point. So there's no reason for them not to have autonomy in a clinic and not working for some sweatshop PT clinic somewhere.
Sure. So. Well, and even if you don't do a franchise model, you could do an education program where you don't have any stake in their business. They can't come back to you and say, well, you didn't teach me how to run Google Ads because you're not a Google Ads expert. You're a clinician. Like that's what you do. So I think that's another piece too, is you can find get in where you fit in and help people. Because there's even stuff we've done with like Ryan Esdor. We had him on the show. He runs Superhuman Lab in Urbandale. And he's a massage therapist by trade, but he specializes in helping athletes with pain, overcoming things like that. I can send you his episode afterwards. But
thank you.
We were working with him to do take his program and turn it into like an education thing because there's so many massage therapists that wanted to do stuff he was doing because he's worked with like Dwight Howard, Hines Ward, some of these really popular athletes. And people are just like, how do I do that? And he's like, oh, I'll just tell you what I did. And like that kind of became like an online program for him. So there's so many ways you can do it and to skin that cat.
Because honestly, like at this point too, I've developed some of my own like hybrid of things, like I'm doing a little of this, a little of that, combining some of these manual techniques, things I've learned from speech therapists, things I've learned along the way. And so, how can you teach other people some of these things? And so even too, I think some of these oncology plastic reconstructive patients too, of like how to empower themselves in their recovery too. So I have a few different ideas. And so just trying to, the time to really do it also, but I will make time.
Sure. That's great. Biggest thing that you've learned in the last 6 months, what would you say as a business owner now? Like, you've gotten your feet a little bit wet. You're obviously learning every day, new things here and there. What's been the biggest takeaway for you in starting your business? Are you happy with it, or are you thirsty for more? What's kind of the takeaway there?
I've been really surprised, or I should say I'm really pleased with like how well received it is. I'm always still so like humbled that people are sharing about me or talking to other people about me. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. Thank you. But I also think too, the biggest takeaway is I think we have more time than what people think we do. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people are like, oh, how do you have time to do your Instagram or whatever else? It's like you pocket your time. Like I'm up every morning at 5. I'm working on whatever before I go. And then like I will make and find time to do things. And so I think if people are like, oh, I don't have time to do this, it's like you do. You will make your time and you will find your time. And I think in general too, it's like, oh, I kind of like this. Like I want to just keep the momentum and the ball rolling. And kind of like a snowball, started small, took a while to pack the snow down, but just keep it rolling and moving forward.
Sure.
And I think Des Moines is a really great community for this sort of thing. It's a definite word of mouth type of town.
Sure.
So I'm super grateful to be at this point talking with you.
Sure. Yeah. You've made it. This is the top of the mountain. The Rhymes with the Odd podcast. Appreciate you coming on.
I mean, check this off my list.
Sure. Any advice for other people in the healthcare field that are toying with the idea of doing their own business? What advice would you have for somebody that's in that kind of brain space right now?
I think you could totally do it. Like, I think just what's going to make you different than somebody else. And I think if you understand what it is you're trying to do, understand your brand, and what your market you're looking to serve and to work with, I think you can definitely do it.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Ryan.
Glad we had to go all the way to Tulsa just to figure out that we live close to each other. But
we literally live down the street from each other.
Sure. Yeah. I'm in Polk City, and my wife has a salon studio in Ankeny, so she's in Dolce Vita. So
yeah, I'm off of Highway 415 in Ankeny.
Right. Really close there. So, where can people learn more about you if they're in the Des Moines area and they're having lymphatic issues, bloating, or the other stuff we talked about? Where can they learn more about you?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook and my website. So it's all basically cryowellnessstudio.com is my website, and then cryowellness.studio is my Instagram. And then my name's Krysta Bryers.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your story, because I think people will connect, especially with the hardships that push them to do the things they know they need to do or want to do. It just the right circumstances have to fit out. So it's really cool to talk with someone like yourself that saw those signs and took the leap and is doing the thing that they want to do and challenging themselves every day.
Well, as Asa Bay says, I saw the sign and it opened up my eyes.
Sure. I love it.
Life is about understanding.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Check her out if you're not already. That again caps another episode of the Rhymes with the Odd podcast. If you're not already, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, and we're also on Spotify and iTunes. Give us a 5-star review if you haven't, and check us out on social media. My name is Ryan Snod. It Rhymes with the Odd. We'll catch you in the next episode. Peace. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of the Rhymes with the Odd podcast. We really do appreciate your support. If you could give us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes, that makes a world of difference, guys. Also, if you're tuning in on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and check us out on social media. Also, if you'd like to inquire more about our services here at Snod Media Group or learn about doing your own podcast for your own business, you can find us at snodmedia.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.